we conclude the Book of Moments with the 10th chapter, The Beggar, by Anton Chekhov. Now, when we talk of beggars, what comes to your mind? We give them alms. Alms as in not these alms. Alms, A-L-M-S. Yeah? We give them money. We give them some food. But these days, looking at the trend, looking at, all of us being aware, we would rather prefer giving only food and not money because we have no idea how they use that money. Do they actually use it for their food to fill their stomach, or do they go and smoke and do something wrong? They use the money wrongly. So we are all aware, and for the reason we rather prefer giving them, food only. Even when it comes to new blankets, everyone goes and donates. What do these guys do? They go and they sell and they take money and then they use it in for the wrong reasons. So it's better to give them food. Now let's talk about this unique beggar of ours. How is he and what was he up to? So before that, let's know about the author. Anton Pavlovich Chekhov is regarded as one of Russia's most cherished storytellers. Today, he is remembered as a playwright and one of the masters of the modern short story. He's a playwright. In 1888, Chekhov was rewarded the Pushkin Prize, and the very next year, he was elected a member of the Society of Lovers of Russian Literature. In 1901, Chekhov finally married an actress, Olga Nipper, who had performed in his plays. So this is how was his journey. Now, moving on to the plot of the story, as always, let's see what is in store in just a summary of it sort of. The Beggar is the story of a beggar who earns a little by telling lies and thus evokes sympathy in his listeners. One day he comes across Sergei, who does not give him alms but offers to give him work. Now Sergei was, very wise person. The beggar is weak and unwilling to do the laborious job of chopping wood, but the job is somehow done. He gives up begging. Years later, when Sergei comes across the beggar, he is no longer a beggar but a respectable notary. Now, the journey, from begging to becoming a respectable notary is what the whole chapter is all about. Then he discloses the fact that it was Sergei's maidservant who had chopped the wood for him. He hadn't. This act of her kindness had influenced him so much that his whole life was changed. He had become into a new person. He quits begging and starts leading a decent life. When people are under suffering, they should be given a helping hand to come up in life. Very important message. When people are under suffering, when people are undergoing some pain, they are suffering, you should make sure that you give them a helping hand, just like Sergei did. And that's where the whole scenario changed. Yes? So, let's move and see what we have. Kind sir, have pity. Turn your attention to a poor, hungry man. For 3 days I have had nothing to eat. I haven't 5 kopecks for a lodging. I swear it before God. Whose lines, I'm sure you know, is the lines of the beggar. What do you mean by kopecks? These are the Russian coin equal to 1/100th of a ruble. That's the monetary unit of Russia. So he's pleading. He says, I don't have any money at all, even for lodging. So please. And then the most miserable thing is he swears it before God. For 8 years, I was a village school teacher, and then I lost my place through intrigues. Intrigues is some plot, some problem occurred and he lost that job. I fell a victim to calumny. Calumny as in the making of false and defamatory statements about someone in order to ruin or to damage his or her reputation. So, people spoke ill against him, and so he was a victim of it. It is a year now since I have had anything to do. So he's giving his story in such a manner that the listener would just melt and give him some money. But this time the listener was someone different who would not buy his story. So yes, he tells him, I was a village school teacher, right? For 8 years I have done that job, and then I lost my place there because someone, spoke against me, and that's where I lost it. Until day, I have had nothing to do. The advocate, now Sergei is an advocate, remember, looked at the ragged, fawn-colored overcoat of the suppliant as the person making a humble plea to someone in power or authority. So he just looked at the beggar who was, dressed in torn clothes. It was a fawn-colored overcoat and everything was in a mess. He was shabbily dressed. He looked at his dull, drunken eyes, at the red spot on either cheek, and it seemed to him as if he had seen this man somewhere before. He looked at him with suspicious eyes. Says, I think I have seen this man somewhere before. I have now had an offer of a position in the province of Kaluga. The mendicant went on. Mendicant as in the beggar. He is now still trying to tell him more. But I haven't the money to get there. He says, I'm sort of getting an offer of a position in the province of Kaluga. But the problem is I don't have the money to even go there. Help me kindly. I am ashamed to ask, but I am obliged to by circumstances. He says, I'm totally ashamed. I really feel shameful to beg for money, being such a teacher, such a good teacher for literally 8 years, and now I am under these circumstances. I am obliged, as in legally or morally bound to do something. I'm sort of, helpless, and looking at these circumstances around, having no penny in hand, I am really feeling shameful, but yes, I need some money. So he's continuing with his story. Sergei's eyes fell on the man's overshoes, one of which was high and the other low, and he suddenly remembered something. He was still looking at him. Sergei was looking at him. The beggar was going on and on with the story, but Sergei's mind was running elsewhere. He says, this face is familiar. I have seen him somewhere. Then he looked at his shoes. His one shoe was a little high and the other was low. And suddenly that brought something to his mind. What was that? Look here, it seems to me I met you the day before yesterday in Sadovaya Street, he said. But you told me that you were a student who had been expelled and not a village school teacher. Do you remember? Then Sergei recollects, he recalls, he says, day before yesterday, this same man gave me another story. He did not tell me that he was a village school teacher. He told me that he was a student who had been repelled and not a village school teacher. He is telling him, do you remember this? Now the beggar was shocked. No, that can't be so, mumbled the beggar, taken aback. He was actually shocked. He was surprised. I am a village school teacher, and if you like, I can show you my papers. He's still going on. See, it's always said, when you speak one lie, to cover that lie, to protect that lie, to make it, to prove it true, you speak another 100 lies. So it's better to speak once and better to speak the truth. Now, he does not remember, the beggar does not remember that he had given another story. He gave here the story of a village school teacher. There, day before yesterday, he had given him the story of a student. So you see, the lie never stays. You have to remember it to make sure what you had spoken. But truth remains the truth. You don't have to remember that. You have to just speak the fact. So this is one good message. Never speak a lie. It gives you, it puts you in a lot of problems. So let's see what problem does he get into. Says, I can show you my papers. Have done with lying. You called yourself a student and even told me what you had been expelled for. He says, you are lying. The advocate was very sure. He says, look, I know you were lying, and you even told me why you had been expelled, why you had been thrown out. You even explained the reason to me. Don't you remember? Sergei flushed and turned from the ragged creature with an expression of disgust. He was upset, he was angry, and he just moved away from that person. The way he was lying, he was really upset, he was angry with him. So he just turned away from him. This is dishonesty, my dear sir, he cried angrily. This is swindling. I shall send the police for you, damn you. He was very angry. He's swindling as in cheating a person of money. He says, what are you doing? You are lying for money? I am going to call the police right now. Sergei was extremely angry. Sir, he said, laying his hand on his heart, the fact is, I was lying. Now he realized that he is going to get into deeper trouble if he does not confess, if he does not tell the truth. So when he took the name of the police, this guy he had to put a full stop to his lies. So what he did was, he said, sir, and with a hand on his heart, he says, yes, sir, I was lying. I am neither a student nor a school teacher. All that was fiction. All that was fake. Formerly, I sang in a Russian choir and was sent away for drunkenness. Choir as in it is an organized group of singers. You can see all the people singing together. That's a choir group, yeah? And it's an organized group of singers, especially one that takes part in church services or performs in public. So whenever you have a group of singers singing the same thing, that's the choir. So he says, look, I was in that choir, but because I would drink a lot, I was moved away. I was thrown out of there too. But what else can I do? I can't get along without lying. No one will give me anything when I tell the truth. What can I do? Now he's showing his helplessness. He says, look, I was thrown from there. But now if I tell anyone the truth that I used to drink, who would give me the money? Who would help me? You tell me, what can I do? What should I do? If I am not lying, nobody is ready to help me. What can you do? You ask, what can you do? Cried Sergei, coming close to him. Work, that's what you can do. You must work. He says, what can you do means what? Work and you'll get the money. Why are you begging? Work, yes, I know that myself, but where can I find work? He says, okay, I'm ready to work, but who will give me the work? How would you like to chop wood for me? Sergei tells him immediately. He says, okay, fine. Would you like to chop some wood for me? I wouldn't refuse to do that. But in these days, even skilled woodcutters find themselves sitting without bread. He says, I have no issues. I don't mind doing it. But even those who are skilled woodcutters, who are extremely good at cutting wood, even they are sitting without bread. Even they have no work to do. Will you come and chop wood for me? He's saying, I don't know about them. You talk about yourself. Are you ready to do it for me? Yes, sir, I will. Very well. We'll soon find out. Sergei hastened along, rubbing his hands. He called his cook out of the kitchen. They walked along, and there Sergei went and he called out to his cook. Here, Olga, he said, take this gentleman into the woodshed and let him chop wood. Says, okay, take him into the woodshed. There was a woodshed behind the house. Says, okay, take him there and let him chop some wood for us. The scarecrow of a beggar shrugged his shoulders. Now, he really wasn't ready to do it all. He had never worked since long. He used to earn money only with lying. So, the scarecrow of a beggar shrugged his shoulder as if in perplexity. Perplexity as in the state of being puzzled. He was confused. And went irresolutely. Irresolutely as in hesitatingly, undecidedly. He just didn't want to, but he was forced. after the cook. He just followed the cook. It was obvious from his gait that he had not consented to go and chop wood. It was very obvious from his body gesture, from the way you could see from his face that he was not ready. He had not consented, as in he had not given permission for something to happen. He was just not ready for the same. To go and chop wood because he was hungry and wanted work, but simply from pride and shame, and because he had been trapped by his own words. Now here he had landed up helplessly. Why? Because he had put the axe on his own foot. He had landed up into trouble himself. Why? Because of his own words. First he told Sergei about the student, then about the teacher, and when Sergei caught him red-handed, he had no choice. He had to go and do the same. It was obvious too that his strength had been undermined by vodka and that he was unhealthy and did not feel the slightest inclination for toil. Now, because he was drinking a lot, he was drinking vodka, his strength had reduced. He was not strong, he was not healthy enough to sit and chop wood. You need a lot of strength to chop the wood. Definitely not ready for toil, for working extremely hard. Obviously, because there was no strength in his body. Now, neither did he have strength in his body, nor was his mind ready. So both the ways, it did not support him actually to sit and do that hard work. Sergei hurried into the dining room. From its windows, one could see the woodshed and everything that went on in the yard. Now he went into the dining room, and from there he could see the woodshed and everything that was happening there. Standing at the window, Sergei saw the cook and the beggar come out into the yard by the back door and make their way across the dirty snow to the shed. Now he sat there and he could see the cook and the beggar going towards the yard. There was snow in between. It was dirty snow. From there they crossed and they went into the shed. Olga glared wrathfully at her companion. Olga is the cook, and she was staring at him with angry eyes, wrathfully at her companion, shoved him aside with her elbow. She just pushed him aside, with her elbow, unlocked the shed. She opened the shed and angrily banged the door. Now, why was she upset? Let's find out. Next, he saw the pseudo-teacher seat himself on a log and become lost in thought with his red cheeks resting on his fists. Pseudo as in not genuine, spurious or sham. So obviously not the actual teacher, because it was fake. So he sat himself on a log and he became lost in thought with his red cheeks resting on his fists. The woman flung down an axe at his feet. She just threw an axe at his feet, spat angrily, and judging from the expression of her lips, began to scold him. She was so angry. She was extremely angry, and she just threw the axe near his feet and she started scolding him. The beggar irresolutely pulled a billet of wood towards him, set it up between his feet and tapped it feebly with the axe. Now looking at her so angry, he was so scared that he pulled a billet of wood, billet as in a thick piece of wood. He pulled it where? Towards him. He set it up between his feet. Now he had to, hit it. So he set that wood between his feet and tapped it feebly, feebly as in very weak. He did not have strength. With the axe, he tapped it with the axe, but it was extremely not that strong enough because he had no strength. The billet wavered and fell down. Wavered as in it trembled or it faltered and it fell down. The beggar again pulled it to him, blew on his freezing hands. His hands were cold. So he blew on his freezing hands and tapped it with his axe cautiously. Now very carefully this time, he tapped it with the axe as if afraid of hitting his overshoe or of cutting off his finger. The stick of wood again fell to the ground. This time he was a little more careful so that maybe he may not hurt his overshoe or maybe his fingers. So he was a little scared. So he did that, but unfortunately, the stick of wood again fell to the ground. Sergei's anger had vanished. Now, Sergei's anger, he was quiet there, he was watching all that and he saw him working. So now his anger had settled down. It had literally disappeared. And he now began to feel a little sorry and ashamed of himself for having set a spoilt, drunken, perhaps sick man to work at menial labor in the cold. Now, he just realized when he came, when you are angry, you lose your senses. You cannot never make a right decision when you are angry. So that's why it said, you should not make a decision when you're extremely angry or when you're extremely happy. Never come to any conclusions. But this is what he did. And anyways, if you go to see, he did not do really wrong. But then, he was so angry that he just spoke. And he realizes, why was he feeling ashamed? Because he had set a spoilt drunken, perhaps a sick man. That man did not even have strength. And he brought him to work at menial labor. Menial as in unskilled or lacking prestige. Such a small job he gave him to do of chopping wood. That too in the cold. An hour later, Olga came in and announced that the wood had all been chopped. After an hour, she came in and she said, "Sir, the wood has been chopped." "Good. Give him half a ruble." Ruble is the basic monetary unit of Russia. Said Sergei, "If he wants to, he can come back and cut wood on the first day of each month. We can always find work for him." He says, look, give him half a ruble for the work he has done and also tell him that he can come to us on every first day of each month and come and do some work for us and take the money. On the first of the month, the waif made his appearance. The waif as in the homeless person, the beggar. He made his appearance. He actually started coming there and again earned half a ruble, although he could barely stand on his legs. Every month he came there for that half ruble, even that mattered to him. Though he was unbalanced, he couldn't even stand on his legs, yet he came there to chop the wood. From that day on, he often appeared in the yard and every time work was found for him. Some or the other work was found for him. Now he would shovel snow. He would shovel the snow as in he would put the snow, you remove snow with a shovel. It's a tool resembling a spade with a broad blade and typically upturned slides. They move it, with the shovel, they move the snow and they clear the road. So he would shovel snow, now put the woodshed in order, now beat the dust out of the rugs and mattresses. So these are the different kinds of jobs he would do whenever he came there. Every time he received from 20 to 40 kopecks and once even a pair of old trousers was sent out to him. So you need to remember this for one of your answers. You need to know what are the different types of jobs Sergei used to make him do and what all did he receive for the same. When Sergei moved into another house, he hired him to help in the packing and hauling of the furniture. Now, he even made him do these jobs. So you can add this to the list. He even made him do packing because he was shifting to another house and putting the furniture on the truck, hauling the furniture. This time, the waif, the beggar, was sober, gloomy and silent. He was absolutely quiet. He was really serious. He was sad. He hardly touched the furniture and walked behind the wagons, hanging his head, not even making a pretense of appearing busy. He was not even pretending. He was not even showing that he's really busy. He was just walking behind the wagons, hanging his head and just walking plainly. He only shivered in the cold and became embarrassed when the carters jeered at him for his idleness. Now, it was so cold there. Now, Russia, it's really, really cold there. So he only shivered in the cold and he was embarrassed when the people who transport a load on a cart, when the carters jeered at him, as in they made rude and mocking remarks, when they made fun of him for his idleness, for him doing nothing, that is the time he was highly embarrassed. His feebleness and his tattered fancy coat. They jeered at him, they made fun of him for his idleness, for his feebleness, and his tattered fancy coat. They made fun of all of these. After the moving was over, Sergei sent for him. When the shifting was done, then Sergei called the beggar. Well, I am happy that my words have taken effect. I'm glad that I asked you to do some work instead of begging, he said, handing him a ruble. Here's for your pains, all the pain that you have taken, here is the reward. I see you are sober and have no objection to work. You are absolutely fine to work now. What is your name? Now, after so much time, he asks him his name. He says, Lashkov. Lashkov was the beggar's name. Well, Lashkov, I can now offer you some other cleaner employment. Can you write? He says, okay, fine. Now you did all these, small jobs. Now I want to offer you something better, a much cleaner employment, a much cleaner job. Do you write? He says, are you able to write? He says, yes, I can. Then take this letter to a friend of mine tomorrow and you will be given some copying to do. He says, do one thing. This letter I have written to a friend. You take this letter and go to him and you will be given some copying to do. Work hard, don't drink, and remember what I have said to you. Goodbye. He says, remember whatever I have told you. Work hard and please don't drink. This will really help you. And then he wishes him a goodbye. Pleased at having put a man on the right path, Sergei tapped Lashkov kindly on the shoulder and even gave him his hand at parting. He was so happy. Sergei was feeling some kind of satisfaction because he actually made a man who was really useless, who was doing nothing, to do something worthwhile. So he was feeling happy about the fact. In fact, he even tapped Lashkov kindly on the shoulder, because he had done something good. So he, tapped him on the shoulder and he even gave him his hand at parting. He even shook hands with him before saying goodbye. Lashkov took the letter and from that day forth came no more to the yard for work. 2 years went by. He took that letter and he went where he was supposed to go, to Sergei's friend. And after that, he never came to the yard for work for the next 2 years. 2 years went by. Then, one evening, as Sergei was standing at the ticket window of a theatre, paying for his seat, he noticed a little man beside him with a coat collar of curly fur and a worn sealskin cap. Now, Sergei was standing at the ticket window. He was buying his ticket, so he was paying for his seat. Suddenly, he noticed a little man. He notices a man with a coat collar of curly fur. You have only the fur on the collar of that coat and a worn sealskin cap. He was wearing that winter cap. This little individual timidly asked the ticket seller for a seat in the gallery and paid for it in copper coins. Now, Sergei saw this man. What was the man doing? He was in a manner that shows a lack of courage or confidence. Very, shyly, he asked the ticket seller for a seat in the gallery and he paid for it in copper coins. Lashkov, is that you? Cried Sergei, recognizing in the little man his former wood chopper. He somewhere felt this is the same beggar, this is the same guy. So he asked him, Lashkov, is that you? How are you? What are you doing? How is everything with you? He met him after 2 years and he was so happy to see him well dressed. All right, I am a notary now and I am paid 35 rubles a month. You remember where his journey started from? Half ruble. And because now he was working so hard, he was getting 35 rubles. And what was he now? He was a notary. He was a public officer. You know, you have those affidavits and all, you get those things done. He was that public officer who used to do it. So he says, yes, that's me. And I am now a notary and I'm earning 35 rubles a month. Thank heaven, Sergey was so happy. He was overwhelmed. That's fine. I am delighted for your sake. I'm so happy for you. I am very, very glad, Lashkov. You see, you are my godson in a sense. Godson, see, we've heard godmother, godfather, but godson as in he was as good as a son to him. I gave you a push along the right path. You know, he says, somewhere I pushed you on the right path. I'm so glad you continued going on that path and you're making it big now. Do you remember what a roasting I gave you, huh? You know, he says roasting as in an informal or a humorous word, but here it means scolding. He says, remember how badly I had scolded you. I nearly had you sinking into the ground at my feet that day. I had put you to shame. I know it was very, very embarrassing for you the way I had caught you speaking lies. Thank you, old man, for not forgetting my words. Sergey is so happy. He says, I'm so glad you never forgot my words and you continued like work hard and don't drink. Thank you too, said Lashkov. If I hadn't come to you, then I might still have been calling myself a teacher or a student to this day. He says, I'm glad. I should be thanking you. If I had not met you, if I had not come to you, then till day I would have stayed in that same mess at that low level, calling myself a student or a teacher and yet begging in front of people and continuing with my lies. You remember he used to speak lies. Yes, by flying to your protection, I dragged myself out of a pit. He says, I actually got into your protection. I actually came under the right shade and I dragged myself out of a pit. I was in that mess. Here the pit is not a pit actually, not a big hole in the ground, but yes, it is the big mess he was in where he used to lie for the money. Glad he was out of that mess. I am very glad indeed. He says, I'm really very happy. Thank you for your kind words and deeds. I am very grateful to you and to your cook. Now Lashkov, the beggar, continues to tell him. He says, look, I'm so more than happy for your kind words and deeds. Deeds as in actions. Whatever gestures, whatever he did for him, all the work he kept, motivating him, encouraging him to work, even if it was for half a ruble. And Lashkov used to go to him every month for that half a ruble. This cycle continued and today he actually made it big. I am very grateful to you and your cook. He says, I'm grateful to you, but at the same time, I am also extremely grateful to your cook. And why is that? God bless that good and noble woman. You know that woman who used to look at him with anger in her eyes and, she used to scream at him and, she used to just shout at him all the time. You spoke finely then, and I shall be indebted to you to my dying day. He says, I am grateful to you till my last breath. Till I die, I am totally obliged. But strictly speaking, it was your cook, Olga, who saved me. He says, actually speaking, it was your cook who has actually saved me. And Sergey is shocked. He says, how is that? When I used to come to your house to chop wood, she used to begin. Oh, you sot! You sot here is a habitual drunkard. He used to keep drinking all the time, right? And that's the reason he would never get balance. And when he tried to cut the wood would fall. So he used to keep drinking all the time. Oh, you miserable creature. There's nothing for you but ruin. She used to shout at him. Says, you drunkard, wherever you are drunk, you're going to just ruin your life. And then she would sit down opposite me and grow sad, look into my face and weep. She would cry. She would just shout at me, then she would go and sit opposite me and she would look into my face and start crying. "Oh, you unlucky man, there is no pleasure for you in this world, and there will be none in the world to come." She says, "How unlucky you are. Why are you drinking so much? Stop it, because you will never find pleasure in this world. Not even today, not even for the years to come. You drunkard, you will burn in hell." She's so angry. She's saying, "You are going to burn in hell. Oh, you unhappy one." And so she would carry on, in that strain, in that stress, in that, anger. She would just keep going on, and she would spit out all the anger in her words. She would shout at him terribly. I can't tell you how much misery she suffered. Misery as in the state of suffering or sadness. How many tears she shed for my sake. But the chief thing was, she used to chop the wood for me. That was the line. That was the line that made all the difference. She says, she used to be so upset. She used to be so sad for me. She has shed so many tears only because of me. But the main thing, the chief thing was, she used to chop the wood for me. Do you know, sir, that I did not chop one single stick of wood for you? He says, every time I came there to chop wood, it wasn't me. It was she who would do it for me. She did it all. Why this saved me, why I changed, why I stopped drinking at the sight of her, I cannot explain. He says, I have no idea. I actually don't understand why this thing saved me, and what changed me, and what made me to stop drinking. I have no clue. Honestly, why this happened to me, I have no idea. I only know that owing to her words and noble deeds, because of her words which were full of anger, and the kind action, literally opposite was her action. She would help him. And owing to her noble deeds, a change took place in my heart. I realized what is happening. She was angry, she was upset, she would cry for me, but at the same time, she was the one who chopped all the wood. I never chopped a single stick. She set me right, and I shall never forget it. He says, that is what I am. That is the reason. However, it is time to go now. There goes the bell. They were standing outside the theater. And so he tells the entire story to Sergei, and he says, okay, fine. The bell has rung. It's time to get into the theater. Lashkov bowed and departed to the gallery. He bowed down, and yes, he left for the gallery. This is how the whole twist came in the beggar's life. What was the reason? The cook Olga was the reason for him changing into a nice man. It was a nice human being. Some change, sometimes someone is really responsible in bringing the change, in being the reason for you to smile. And in this case, it was Olga for the beggar. So it is very well said by Regis Murray, part of being a person is about helping others. Part of being a person is about you helping others. It is definitely the case. You are a good human, and these things accumulate, these things come when you actually start helping others. So stop being selfish and start being selfless. Think about others too. Yes, keep doing that, and keep watching and keep learning.